Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, Growing Orchids in Jamaica. In case you are new, please subscribe so you see just how I grow orchids in Jamaica. Today I'll be speaking to you about what to do when we get an orchid as a gift. And so guys, if you want to see how to take care of that orchid or getting that orchid to rebloom after getting it as a gift, just stay tuned. Oftentimes, persons will get orchids as gifts, and of course, you know, when you're getting these orchids as gift, they are wrapped nicely and they come in different pots. They come in pots with holes in the bottom, or like these, or they may come in pots like these that do not have any holes in the bottom. There are many other kinds of pots that these orchids will come in. So guys, what we need to understand is that orchids do need to be watered. That's very, very important. Now, there is this common thinking, or I call it a common myth, that orchids do not need to be watered. This is so not true, guys. As a matter of fact, orchids love to be watered because orchids like to dry out in between watering. They take that to think that they do not like to be watered. Or because orchids will grow on trees, they take it to believe that the orchids do not like to be watered. Let me dismiss that myth right here and right now. Orchids love to be watered. However, while they love to be watered, they like to dry out, guys, in between watering. Dry out, guys, yes. So therefore, you need to let them dry before you water them again. And when you're watering them again, it is important that you bathe them. You shower them with water. So if it is that you can put it under a tap and let the water just run through, then you do that. Now, I mentioned that you will get orchids in pots without hole. And that is why it is important that when you get an orchid as a gift, you examine it carefully. So the first thing that you should actually do is to actually remove the wrapper. That's very important. So you'll get your scissors and you will take the bow off, put that aside, and you take the plant from outside of the wrapper. And this is important because when you do that, then you will actually now examine to see whether or not the pot that the orchid comes in has holes in the bottom. If it has holes in the bottom, then perhaps you can leave the plant, because most times they'll put the plant in a planter pot, and you have different kinds of planter pot. So they'll put it in a planter pot just to make the plant a bit more attractive. And that's all it does, make it more attractive. So if it comes in a pot that has no holes in the bottom, like this one, then what will happen when you water the plant? The water will sit in the container. When you water the plant in the container, all that water will now go into the planter pot, and when it sits in that planter pot, what will happen? The roots will start getting saggy and eventually they will rot. Thank you, Orchid 365, for allowing me to use snippets of your last video. So when you water the plant and it is in a planter pot, a planter without hole, the water will settle in the bottom of that pot, and then the roots will start getting very saggy and eventually the plant will die. So you'll start losing the leaves, you'll start losing the blooms quicker than you would normally lose them, because of course it is natural for you to lose some blooms when they get old. So it is so important, guys, that the first thing, remove that wrapper, take the pot, because usually in the nursery they'll grow the plants in pots like these, and if you notice the amount of holes that are in this pot, and so it tells you that when you water that plant, then the water will not sit in that pot, and so it gives the plant enough air movement and allow the water to move out, and so the plant will not sit in that water and become saggy and start rotting. That is important. So guys, remember, the first thing we do is to remove the wrapper. Then we find an area to place that plant in your home. Now, when you're placing that plant in your home, and in this instance, to make it a bit more attractive, we can keep it in this planter because it has holes in the bottom. Find a nice spot in your home. Place it in an area close to an eastern window or somewhere where you may have the evening sun, because the orchids need light. Light is very important to the growing and the survival of the orchid. So therefore, don't just take it, you put it in your living room on the center table and you leave it there. And because you believe it doesn't need light, it doesn't need water, it stays there, and then when it starts dying, then you'll throw it out. There is this belief also that you cannot get them to rebloom. Yes, you can get it to rebloom. And therefore, guys, I am going to help you to figure out how to get this plant to rebloom. So now, take it out of the wrapper. Then what you will do, you find an area in the home that will allow for air circulation and sufficient light. Now, you are going to water the plant, but you are going to wait until the plant dries out before you water the plant. So it depends on the medium that the plant is in, because sometimes if it's a phalaenopsis orchid, it may come in a medium that will hold more water. So in instances like those, what you can do, you can use a pencil and stick it down into that medium. And if it comes out dry, then you know the plant needs to be watered. If it comes out moist or with medium on it, then you know you can wait a few more days before you water. And that is important, because if you overwater as well, even if the planter has holes in it, if you overwater, then what will happen too? You'll end up with the same result, where the roots get saggy and eventually start rotting, and you're not seeing any new growth or any new development, and then you start losing the leaves, and not to mention the flower. Importantly is that you also understand that for some orchids, it is natural for them to lose, especially like these cane dendrobiums. You'll tend to lose some of the bottom leaves because they will get mature and ripen and drop. But you don't expect to see all your leaves getting yellow at the same time. If you notice that all your leaves are getting yellow at the same time, it tells you that something is wrong. And therefore, you have to also observe the plant and notice if something different is happening with that plant. In order to get it to bloom again, develop a routine for watering. How do I develop that routine for watering? Remember, I did say to you, you would check on your medium. So if the plant is in predominantly river stones or gravel, then of course, within 2 or 3 days, depending on where you have that plant, it should start drying out. So you will take that plant, take it out of the planter, and you put it under a tap. You don't have to do that though, but that's a nice way of doing it. You could also get a bottle with a spray nozzle and you mist the plant in case you're watering it inside of the house. So you could do that. And once you realize that every 2 or 3 days this plant dries out, then you develop that routine in terms of watering. It is also important that you fertilize because, of course, the persons who are growing these plants for sale, they will fertilize them because they want them to come nice and healthy. And so for you to get them to grow nice and healthy as well, it is usually best that you continue to give them a little fertilizer. And fertilizer is just plant nutrients, and they come in different brands and in different forms. So if you are not necessarily an avid gardener, you could buy the slow release fertilizer and you put a teaspoon of that into the medium, into the pot, and that will last for up to 3 months. So each time you take that plant and you water it, you flush it with water, what will happen? The fertilizer will act and the plant will do pretty well. In case you don't want to do that, you can use a water-soluble fertilizer. And usually, especially if you are new, you can use a balanced fertilizer. So a 20-20-20 formulation is usually a very good one to start with. And if you can use that depending on the manufacturer's instructions. If not, for us plant growers, we will fertilize with a weak fertilizer once per week. You can do that. If not, you can fertilize once every 2 weeks or even once per month, depending on what fertilizer you're using and the instruction that comes with that fertilizer. All right, another rule of thumb for growing these orchids is the fact that insects like these plants or just about any plants. So it is important that you examine the plant carefully. So especially if it's gonna be reblooming, because once the bloom from here is gone, then it will send out another new growth from the cane. And if you notice that is not happening, then perhaps something is wrong. Sometimes what you can do, once you have enjoyed all the blooms, then once the blooms are all gone, you'll cut this off. And this is so for this particular plant, the Dendrobium orchids. Then you put it in an area where it gets semi-shade. So you don't put it in the full sun, guys, because if you put it in the full sun, you're going to shock the plant. And so a veranda is perhaps a good area, or a patio is also a good area, or even on the outside. But wherever you're putting it on the outside, just ensure that it is not in the full sun. That's very important. So it will send out another new shoot, and then once that new shoot becomes mature, it will send out what we call a spike. And that spike will develop into another bloom. And that is how you get your plant to rebloom. However, there are times, depending on where you have it, that insects may get on it. Whether ants, whether thrips, scales, and these are some of the main ones that you may find on the plant. So when you examine it, if you see anything unusual, then perhaps you can use a damp rag with some alcohol or hydrogen peroxide and you can wipe it off. There are some insects you can pick off. There are some you'll have to spray. You can spray with 3% hydrogen peroxide, and that most times will help. Usually you don't spray the blooms when they are opened, but you can spray the buds just to ensure. But if you don't see any signs of insects or anything on your plant, on your bud, then there will be no need for you to be spraying. Of course, there are times when we have our nice ceramic bowls or planters and we want to keep our plants in them on the inside. A rule of thumb is you can put some gravel in the bottom of the planter right? So you'll put like a layer of gravel and then you'll drop the plant in. However, when you're watering, you take the plant from the planter, water it, allow the excess water to run out, and then you replace it into your planter. With the gravel in there, if there is excess water in the pot in medium, then what will happen, it will drain into the gravel, and it actually will not have the plant sitting in that water, but actually now becomes what we call a humidity tray. Do not water again until the medium and the gravel is dry. If it is not dry, do not water, because that is how now you will get a proliferation of bacteria developing and stuff like that, or you'll have the roots rotting. So guys, if you follow these simple instructions, and I'll just run through them one more time. Remember, when you get a plant as a gift, the first thing you will do, you will examine that plant. So you can take it and you can look under it to see if there are holes. Another way of doing that, when you water, if the water is not running through the bottom of that pot, then you would understand that there are no holes in the pot, and you need to immediately take that plant out of that container. Now, when you take it out of the container, remember, you water as soon as the plant dries out. So if it takes 2 days, depending on where you are and the condition, because if it's a windy area, if it's a hot area, then therefore you may need to water the plant more frequently than if the area is humid and not so hot. And that is why it is important that you understand too the environment in which you live or where you are, because what works for one person may not necessarily work for you, because it depends on your situation. And the rule of thumb here is check the medium before you water. Ensure that it is dry. So usually it will take 2 to 3 days to dry out, and if that is the case, you can water every 2 to 3 days. One of the things I do as a rule, I will water once in the week and once on the weekend. So I basically water twice per week, and that works for me. But the fact that that works for me doesn't necessarily mean that that will work for you, because it depends on where you are, because you may need to water more frequently, because the area I live in is really a cool area. So whilst I may be able to water twice per week, you may have to water every other day. And not to mention in the summer, you may have to water every day. So guys, if you follow these instructions, I am sure and I guarantee that you will never lose another one of your orchid that you receive as a gift. And yes, you can get them to rebloom. I have seen situations where persons get them as gifts, and once they are finished blooming, they put them outside or throw them out in the trash. You can get it to rebloom, guys. Just follow these simple instructions and just let me know what happens. So guys, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And so you never miss another video, please subscribe to my channel. And as we say in Jamaica, just follow back on me. This is the Orchid Duck, and I am growing orchids in Manchester, Jamaica.